It's Tuesday, June 18th. Is it today? Yeah, it's the 18th, 2024. It's been a long day for me. I am actually trying to record this podcast from up at the lake, so bear with us. I don't think we're going to have much in the way of a video. It's pretty much going to be an audio only podcast. I don't have a lot of bandwidth up here. But regardless of all that, we'll get into that a little later. But this is time for the Knee Jerks podcast of Eno, Nick, and Big Al. I am Big Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, are my compadres in crime here. First off, let's bring on the new guy, Nick Milanovich. Nick, something on the left side of the country.
Hey, guys. Hello from sunny Seattle, and it actually is sunny and a really nice 65 degrees, which for me is perfect weather. And sorry, I know you guys are cooking out there in Michigan. But actually, I'm not sorry.
To say the very least.
So.
Right, and joining me in Michigan, I'm not in Southeast Michigan right now. I'm up high in the mid near Traverse City. But joining me from Southeast Michigan is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things, and that would be Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds Substack, which I highly recommend you subscribing to. We'll have links in the show notes to that. Greg, how's things back in boiling hot Detroit?
It is. It's in the 90s. It's going to be in the 90s all week, I'm told, and maybe even into next. We are getting some sort of an effect from something. I'm not sure it's El Nino or what it is, but something is affecting the entire country right now, just not just Michigan. But it is very, very steamy. I am Greg Eno from my aforementioned Substack, gregeno.substack.com. I would greatly appreciate it if you do as Al suggests and subscribe. I come into your inbox every Monday. Occasionally, I'll throw a bonus at you like I did last Thursday when I wrote about the late, great Jerry West. But pretty much every Monday night, I'll be in your inbox, so check me out there. We have no guests tonight, but that's okay. We've had a lot of guests lately. We are going to come back at you July 1st with City Hall. That will be an NBA-centric, obviously, discussion with City, as we will have been about 5 days away, 5 days after, I should say, the NBA draft, which I believe takes place on the 26th. So City will give us his thoughts about that and about what moves, if any, the Pistons may have made. There are some rumblings they may trade down in the draft, City is telling me. So we'll see what happens there. And, of course, the NBA Finals just finished. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, with City on July 1st. But tonight we're going to be guestless, and that's okay. We have a couple things we're going to talk about tonight. Al's got some things cooking with the Tigers and with the Pistons. But before we get to any of that stuff, we're going to play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I'll give Al and Nick a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if either of those gentlemen can guess that person within the first two clues, they will receive a Rubik's Cube. But because I know they're not patient enough to work it, they'll receive one already solved. So that'll make it a lot easier for you guys. This person, guys, this person made his name in the world of baseball. He was born on this date in 1939. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2020. He is a Hall of Famer. He is a member of the 3,000 Hit Club, and he played his entire career in the National League, and I'll stop there. Any guesses?
See, Greg, can you repeat the last part of that? Because I kind of missed it up here. So,
sure. He was born in 1939, died in 2020. He is in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
He has 3,000 hits, and he played his entire career in the National League.
Okay. All right. And now I heard all that. Okay. 3,000 hits, died in 2020. Oh. Oh, God. It's a tough one. It seems like we should know this.
You should.
I draw a blank. I know when we hear the name, it's going to be like, duh, but.
Yeah.
Right. That's okay. It's just the first clue. It's only the first clue.
All right. And what year did you say? It was 1930, correct? So he
39.
played from the 50s
39.
probably to 70 or so.
1939. 39.
1939. Okay, so that would put him from the late 60s to the 80s. Huh. Damn. I don't know. We're just at the pass because.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, we'll wait for question 2 because one. I'll just admit, everybody, I've been drinking today, so not being the sharpest knife in the drawer today. So, like I said, I'm at the lake. That's what we do. We day drink up here. So, like I said, we just got off the boat at like 6 o'clock, to come in and have dinner. So, and they're going back out. No, I'm stuck. I'm stuck inside the camper. They're going back out in the lake. So, all right. With that out of the way, we'll get back. We'll get to birthday game question 2 in a little bit. We got essentially we're going to try and keep this to a little shorter podcast because this is kind of an experiment. We've never done this when I have not been home, where I have all the bandwidth in the world. I have my big boy computer and a big screen. I'm trying to do this on a laptop I'm not familiar with. It's Linda's. I've never used it before until yesterday. And we're trying to do this on a 4G hotspot. So that's going to be fun. So bear with us, please. But with that, we got some Tigers talk and we have some Pistons talk. And we know how Nick feels about both. So it should be interesting. Let's start with the Pistons, guys, because they probably made the most news over the past few weeks, even if it's been very weird. And we'll start with, since we haven't really had a chance to talk about it, and that would be Troy Weaver got the Ziggy, as Greg's favorite euphemism for firing somebody. The restoration failed, guys. The Pistons owner, Tom Gores, finally did the inevitable and fired Weaver after 4 seasons at the helm. The 2023-2024 Pistons season was beyond awful. They had the worst overall record in the NBA at 1468. That was the worst in team history. And obviously the low light of the season and of his tenure was the 28-game losing streak, which was an NBA record. I guess first off, guys, why the hell did it take so long? Why wasn't this done during the season? Why don't you go ahead, Greg?
Well, I mean, that is the $64,000 question. I'm sure we'll get into the apparent return of Monty Williams in this discussion as well. But as far as why I don't know. I honestly don't. But you know what though? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with just riding that. The Pistons weren't going anywhere anyway. The only thing that would have been nice with the new person would have had a chance to kind of get their feet wet a little bit, assess the roster, whatever. But I'm okay with making that move. They didn't make it as quickly after the season ended as I would have liked. I would have liked there to have been almost like a day after the season ended kind of a thing, like they do in the NFL. But whatever. It's done. At least they did it. The whole timing thing is weird now. They just put everything off kilter because the draft is coming up. They just hired the new Pobo a few weeks ago. He doesn't have a lot of time to get ready for the draft. But again, like I said in my column a couple weeks ago, it doesn't really matter. This team is so screwed up anyway that who cares at this juncture? But I'm really disappointed that it looks like that the coach is staying. I wrote in my piece a week and a half ago that you really can't have a true teardown that needs to happen if you're going to keep the coach. I don't know what they're thinking of with that. Langdon, I hope that's his call. I really hope that's not Tom Gores' call, because then we've been bamboozled into thinking that the new guy's got autonomy. We were told he was going to have autonomy. If this is Langdon's decision to keep Monty, then I'm already mad at Langdon for not making the move that should be made. But what are you going to do? But no, I'm okay with waiting, Al. I just think they still waited too long after the season to do this.
Yeah, Nick, I know you got feelings about this Pistons season, to say the very least. When it comes to Weaver, I'm actually flabbergasted that I guess there was talk that they offered him a scouting job to stay with the team. But the fact that he wasn't fired after the 28-game losing streak I think that's the most head-scratching thing of all, to be honest with you.
I was thinking about that. It would make sense. I could see why you would want to fire him after that losing streak, or even during that losing streak for that matter. But they did not. And my guess is they must have not had a backup person if they got rid of Weaver. It's like God knows who they had to take over for him. Then the other part was what I was thinking Goris was doing by hiring a Pobo was that he was going to pass the buck. So Goris really screwed everything up by kind of, I'm guessing he went around to Weaver and hired Monty and is kind of meddling in the most irritating ways. Then, and is partially responsible for signing off on Weaver's plan, whatever that was. Then by hiring the Pobo, I think what he did was like give all the responsibility for the Pobo to clean up Tom Goris's mess. So it's the Pobo is Langdon firing or getting rid of Weaver. It's Langdon who will decide on the coach. I'm with Greg on this. Like, I don't know why on earth you keep the coach. You could say he inherited a mess, but honestly, he didn't make it any better. In fact, he made it worse. He had like some of the strangest decisions, like starting Killian Hayes over Ivy, starting Isaiah Livers at all. And a bunch of other really odd decisions as coach. So I don't trust him going into the season. And as far as the draft goes and what it means for the draft, I really don't give a damn about the draft. The Pistons are full of young guys. Adding in one more young guy, are they going to really make things worse or better?
Yeah.
No, I don't care who it is. Especially this draft is supposedly supposed to be very weak, and which is even less makes it even less exciting. It's like I really don't care what they do in a draft. It's probably totally irrelevant. So, and they're a mess. I agree with Greg. They're just an absolute mess.
Yeah, Greg, that kind of brings up what's going on with Monty Williams. There's been nothing. There's been no vote of confidence. There's been no he's fired. There's been absolutely nothing from the Pistons other than what Trajan Langton has done. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll get into him and who he's brought on. But it's kind of strange that there's been no press conference, about Langton being hired. There's been no press conference in regard to what's going on with Monty Williams. There's been absolutely no peep other than a press release from the Pistons and Tom Gore saying that Trajan Langton is now the Pobo. So what's your thoughts on all this, that there's been nothing at all thrown out there?
Greg, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I was on mute. You're right. That is odd. That is for sure odd, without question. Why they wouldn't unveil Langdon, you're right, beyond just a sanitary press release. Why the media has not been given the opportunity to ask him any questions, and I'm sure the Monty Williams question would have come up. Why Monty's fate hasn't really been definitively decided, other than a couple of things. Number one, the national media, of course, has basically said that according to their sources, they believe that Monty's coming back. And then the recent hiring last week of the shooting coach from the Pelicans was another indication, because that was portrayed as being added to Monty Williams' coaching staff, this new shooting coach, who's been working for the Pelicans for the past 14 years, and who has Monty Williams connections, of course, by the way, and Langdon connections, as far as that goes. Well, that's another little hint, I guess, that Monty is the D coming back. But you're right. It just kind of fits with the way this whole organization has been run, and especially how this past year has been run. There was so much pomp and circumstance when they hired Stan Van Gundy. There was pomp and circumstance when they hired Dwayne Casey. There was pomp and circumstance when they brought in Weaver. There was pomp and circumstance when they hired Monty. And now all of a sudden they go radio silent on one of the, on a huge hiring. And now, while it was not unforeseen that Troy would be let go, you think you would want to bring the new man in and have him face the media and be introduced and so forth. And that is, so it is odd. It's a weird start, frankly. It's just a weird start to this whole new administration. It's very odd, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's what really is, you might think of the excuse that well, they don't want to announce anything during the playoffs or the NBA Finals, which
Right,
ended last night.
right.
But what gets me is it hasn't stopped other teams from making announcements and doing things. This is the strangest thing I've ever seen from a team in Detroit, Greg. We've seen countless coaches and general managers and presidents and whatever, or roster moves made, big trades, and there has been a press conference. There has been uh, there's been, like you said, hoopla. Yet with this, it's like Tom Gores. I really feels to me. I don't know how you feel about this, Greg, but it feels to me like Tom Gores doesn't want to face the questions as to why you waited so long to fire Weaver, and why haven't you made a decision on Monty Williams, or why don't you want to talk about what you're going to do with Monty Williams? That's my feeling. I think Gores just doesn't want to face the media.
Yeah, well, there's that. There's that. But you know what? When you have a a fan base that is completely, absolutely jaded right now, completely jaded, they it makes sense what you're saying that Gores would just as soon stay in Los Angeles and but at least put Langdon out there. Why can't he put Langdon out there and have Langdon do a
Yeah,
press conference, or at least do a virtual Q&A session on Zoom or something where he can answer some questions. I don't care about. I don't, frankly, to be honest with you, Al, I don't care what Gores has to say. I really don't. I want to know what Langdon has to say. I want to know what his plans are to get the Pistons back into prominence. That's what I want to hear about. And why can't they put Langdon on a Zoom call with the Detroit media and do it that way? I mean, that's silly because we're not in COVID anymore. But why can't they at least do that?
Al, you're on mute.
all right, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yep,
can.
I can hear you.
Yes, I can.
All right, I don't know what happened, but I'm back. Oh, this will be fun. All right, I don't know what I missed, but let me go to you, Nick. Uh, what the, Greg kind of let us know what he thought, that we don't know. He doesn't care what Gores has to say about anything. Uh, but I still find it strange that it's been radio silence from a team that really needs all the positive uh, news that can get out. And firing Troy Weaver for this fan base is a huge positive. And if they decided to move on from Monty Williams, I think the fan base would be highly behind that. I don't know what to make what's going on with the Pistons front office right now. And you would think Langton would want to get himself out there.
Yeah, I mean, you would think so, but I don't know. Is there like any kind of rule in the NBA where teams can't announce something during postseason times? Is that the
For the media
NBA?
yet.
Is that? I don't know if that's a rule or not, and so
We
I'm
were
wondering if they're
talking
holding
about
back.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's. I don't know if that's a hard rule. If that's just one of those unwritten things. I,
Yeah.
but I feel like though,
Because they
Nick.
could have done it today.
Well, but I feel like if that was the case, Nick, then we would know it. The media would say, well, the Pistons cannot officially make this announcement because teams are forbidden from making such announcements during the NBA playoffs. But I haven't heard anybody say that. I haven't heard anybody say definitively that that's not allowed. So I don't know if that's even the case.
Well, then that goes to my second thought on why they haven't done it, because who's gonna introduce and announce the hiring of Langdon? It would have to be Goris.
Yeah.
And he's way too much of a chicken shit at this point. Because even during that one stupid press conference he had during the losing streak, where he talked about at least we're doing community service, that was a very, very controlled audience that he had that one when he had that press conference. It wasn't just wide open to the public. And people are going to ask Goris questions, and he screwed the pooch during that press conference back in December. You think he's going to get any better now? I doubt it. This is such a disaster. The only thing that would have saved Goris is that the Detroit media has kid gloves when asking him questions. So
yeah.
You know what though, Nick? I don't think the fans, I could be mistaken, but I don't think the fans really care what Tom Goris has to say at this juncture. I think he's a lost cause in their minds. I think what they would rather hear is what Trajan Langton has, what he plans to do to bring this once proud franchise back to prominence. Because I think Goris is one of those guys, Nick. He's kind of like Chris Ilitch. The more you hear from him, the more more angry you get, because the way he talks and the things he says, hearing from him makes things worse, not better.
I agree with you 100%. There's nothing Goris can say at this point that makes any bit of difference. It's like William Clay Ford going up year after year for like 5 decades,
right?
Introducing another coach, and this is a new beginning bullshit.
Yep.
And seriously, I do want to hear what Langdon has to say. It'll give me a judgment on what he's thinking. Like when you listen to Yzerman at his intro conferences or any of his press conferences, you have a feel that okay, he may not have won the Stanley Cup, he may still have missed the playoffs, but he's trying to improve the team. And then there's the flip side, which we'll talk about later on, was with Harris, and you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing here? And I want to see which one Langdon is, to be honest.
Right.
Because I don't know. He got rid of Troy Weaver, which is a no-brainer.
Right.
But he's keeping Monty, which is like, what the hell's he thinking? And I want to know what he's thinking.
Right.
So,
well, and to that point, there hasn't even been an official announcement, and this is to Al's question. There hasn't even been an official announcement about Monty. We're all making this conjecture that he is coming back. He probably is, but we don't even know that. We don't even know that for a fact, let alone for Langdon to say, this is why we're keeping Monty Williams. Even at this point, I will even take a press release at this juncture about the Monty situation to explain why he's coming back. And the Pistons probably feel like they don't owe anybody an explanation about why he's coming back, which is really tone deaf.
I would agree with you. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been seeing this online. People are asking, is Monty back? Is he coming back? Is he not coming back?
Right.
There's no, people are reading between the lines and sort of speculating, but it's ambiguous, because I think about 2 weeks ago, there was something saying that Langdon's going to review the coaching staff at this Friday, whatever. This is like 2 weeks ago, I think. And after that, there was nothing. The only way I interpret it is if there's nothing, then there's nothing to change other than the hiring of that one shooting coach. Then everything else is going to stay the same. That's my guess. But it's like, let's not worry about bothering to clarify anything with the fans. It's like you're just going underground and doing whatever, and you want to get fan interest in your team after a 14-win season. Boy, this is exactly not the way to do it.
Right.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, what you're saying about they're hiring Fred Vinson, who was supposedly one of the best shooting coaches in the NBA. But this is Rod Stein from the Stein line, I think a former ESPN guy who now runs a Substack like Greg, and he I guess James Edwards of the Athletic has kind of been saying the same stuff. And this is what he wrote the other day. Is one source of knowledge of Detroit's thinking sold the Stein line that Friday's ESPN report about the Pistons hiring Vinson from New Orleans, blah, blah, blah. It's a clear signal that Williams will be back for year 2 of his 6-year contract. The source described it as a likely outcome. And also, I know James Edwards of The Athletic has kind of been saying the same thing, that and if there's one guy that seems to be really connected to the Pistons front office, it's Edwards of The Athletic. So I guess you're right when it comes down to it. I don't think they would be adding to the staff, guys, if if they were just going to blow up the coaching staff. And the other thing I find interesting, though, is that how was this done without Williams' input? Because it's kind of weird that the assistant coach is hired and essentially we don't know the who, how, why, what, or where about it. It's very strange.
Well, again, it's not. It's very strange for a normal team.
Yeah.
But it's just something. It's just something we've come to expect with the Pistons. And here's the other thing too. I mean, we talk a lot about the history of the Pistons, and yes, they've won championship. That's true. They've won 3. That's not to be sneezed at. That's true. But you take away that the 1980s, and you take away those few years they had in the mid 2000s when they were championship contenders. Other than, and the Pistons have been in Detroit for 67 years. If you take those little pockets of time out of the equation, this has been a really weird franchise, guys. I could tell you a bunch of stories, and you know a lot of them already, but a ton of stories. They've just been run weirdly. And Bill Davidson came in and just kind of ended that weirdness for a while. He kind of stabilized everything. They became a real franchise. They're the first team, I think, in the NBA to have their own private plane and blah, blah, blah. He built the Palace. Davidson did a lot of great things. But before Davidson and since Davidson, they've been weird. They've just been a weird franchise. And that obviously speaks a lot to the owner, for sure. But they've just been strange. So this is not, we're all aghast here, the 3 of us, but we really shouldn't be, because this is kind of par for the course.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
You're right about that. It seems like this team has. There's been essentially 2 eras where they were competently model franchises, and that was under Trader Jack and Joe Dumars for a sense, and even Dumars has ended badly. So they make a good point that this just seems to be a very weird franchise, and we tend to forget, especially the Zollner era before Bill Davidson bought him, because the Pistons were the Clippers. They were like the the Stepien Cavaliers when you go back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Other than a couple years under Ray Scott.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Very strange franchise. That is a whole other discussion in and of itself. But anyway, we'll see. Go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this, guys. They're already naming a shooting coach, and I've seen a couple places bring this up. I think Detroit Bad Boys was one, and I've seen that kind of in the Athletic as well. I'll ask you this, Nick. I'll go with you first. They're hiring a shooting coach, and this team has a bunch of young players who essentially can't shoot. Or at the very least, can't shoot from 3, but for the most part, they can't shoot. That gives me doesn't that give you the vibes, Nick, that they're not going to blow up this roster, and they're going to see if they can get something out of the young kids if they're bringing in a highly thought of shooting coach, rather than get rid of some of these guys and try to bring in. I don't know where they're going to go with this, but bringing in a shooting coach gives me vibes that Ivy is not going anywhere, and Isaiah Stewart's not going anywhere. Ozzie Thompson's not going anywhere. It kind of feels like they're going to run it back at least another year.
Well, there's a couple things here. Number one, regardless of who they keep, they can't shoot. It really almost doesn't matter who they end up keeping or not. I don't know what Langdon thinks when it comes to trading guys and how savvy he is. I have no clue. If you're telling me to look at the Pelicans to see, to look at his body of work, well, they're not that great, to be honest.
Yeah. Right.
So the shooting coach, I think, was needed. If you watch those games, you realize they couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. So they'll need it no matter who they bring in, to be honest. Thompson was a terrible shooter. Ivy is like, you're not sure which Ivy you get. Some days he's like lights out shooting. Sometimes he looked hopeless. I honestly think they need somebody to teach them defense. I think, well, they need a lot of work. They need a lot of development work. No matter, they got a lot of young guys, even if they trade away a few. So they're going to need shooting help, no matter what. I mean, shooting, coaching, and like players. Yeah. So shooting was a problem from 2 points and from 3 points. So, it's like, why didn't somebody think of this years ago when they started drafting all of these young guys, that they're going to need a lot of coaches to help them become NBA caliber players? So, I don't know if it means anything in terms of like who's going to get traded and who's going to get kept. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Greg, let me ask you this. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. Well, Derek, let me ask you this. They have $62 million reportedly under the cap to play with. They have the number 5 draft pick in this upcoming draft. The question is, I've already seen hints again. I think I saw it today. People are saying, well, maybe they'll go one more year with eating bad contracts. They'll draft another young guy and see what happens. I don't know, Greg, if the fan base will tolerate that. With the another year of Joe Harris and Kevin Knox and stuff like that eating bad contracts. I don't think the fan base is ready, willing, or able to have another year. Say we're just going to run it with the young kids. Any veterans we're going to come in are going to be expiring contracts. We're going to do some synodying. And I don't think the fan base will tolerate it.
Well, the fan base also, you might be right about that, but the fan base is a lot smarter than I think some people may give them credit for. They know that this is not going to be a turnaround that's going to take that can be done in a couple of years. This is going to be this is going to be a long, painful project. It's not going to be turned around quickly. So I think they'd be okay with here's what they would be okay with. They would be okay with sticking with some of the players that they still have, but they want to see here's what they want to see: legitimate NBA players come through here. Now, knowing darn well that they're not going to be players that are going to be the ones that are leading the Pistons to the promised land. I'll give you an example. When the Red Wings were really, really, really bad in the early 80s when Mike Ilitch bought them and he hired Jimmy Devellano, and they were essentially an expansion team. That's how bad they were. Jimmy D knew that, but he also knew that he needed to have legitimate NHL players on the roster. One of the things he said at his opening press conference back in 1982 was, as long as I'm the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings, we will not trade a draft choice. And that's exactly what he did. He did not trade a draft choice. But what he did was he signed up, and you remember this, Al, he signed a bunch of low salary NHL veterans who were not necessarily Hall of Famers, but who had been around the block, who knew what it was like to play in the NHL. I'm talking about guys like Stan Weir and I can name Reggie Leach, and I can name a bunch of them who came through here, Brad Park, who were not either past their prime or just were never really great players to begin with, but they were established NHL players willing to, to play on a shoestring contract and give the Red Wings some legitimacy. Now, they still weren't very good, but he brought in legitimate NHL players that had been in the NHL for many years, and they weren't just raw rookies. And I think the fans in Detroit would be okay if Langton brought in guys who everyone in the world knows is not going to be part of the core going forward, but gives the team some legitimacy. How many times has City Hall told us that you need vets? You need veterans on your team. You need guys who have been there. They don't have to be all-stars. They don't have to be Hall of Famers. They just need to be guys that have been in the league. And that's the one thing that I think Troy Weaver just never got. He always tried to have reclamation projects. Everybody who was ever drafted in 2020, 2021 that he wasn't able to draft, he wanted to get and see if he can, turn them into something. That was his fetish. His fetish was, let's get guys that I wish I would have drafted 4 years ago and see if our coaching staff can make something out of these guys. Well, no, the fan base. Now the names you mentioned, Joe Harris, that's not a good example. I'm not talking about guys like that.
Right.
I'm talking about
Yeah.
NBA veterans who, again, they don't have to be Hall of Famers. Just guys that have been around the league. Guys that know what it's like to be in the NBA, and that's what these young kids are not surrounded by. They don't have that. They just don't, and that is so important in this league. And I wrote in my piece last week. This is the NBA right now is inarguably the most talented it's ever been, and punishes untalented and inexperienced teams the worst it's ever punished those types of teams ever in the history of the NBA. And that's why the Pistons have won 14 games, 17 games, 20 games, because they can't. It's not like back in the 80s where you could have a bad roster and still win 30 games. No, it's not like that anymore. This league is too talented. It's without question the most talented the league's ever been in the history. And it's just a perfect storm to create and that's why you lost 28 games in a row, because they didn't have that veteran presence. Nobody to close out games. Nobody to take the last shot. Nobody to help out Kate Cunningham. It was a perfect storm in this day. This team would not have lost 28 games 20 years ago. 28 games in a row 20 years ago. No way. No way. They would have figured out a way to win probably 9 or 10 of those 28 games. But in this day and age, in this NBA, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's and to factor that in, as well as that's the same thing has happened with tanking. They're essentially, I won't say punishing teams for tanking, but they aren't rewarding them the way they used to, because, like I said, the Pistons had the worst record in the league, and they only had a 40% chance at the number 1 pick, and obviously they ended up, and the most likely, going by the odds, was the 5 pick, and that's where they ended up. Nick, where do you fall on all this? What do you think is going to happen? Where would you like to see the roster go? Do you want to see them run it back with the young guys? Does it need to be blown up again? Do you like Greg's idea of actually finding competent NBA players? I really don't know what to do here.
Well, I think the one thing they haven't tried is finding competent NBA players.
That's a good point. You're right about that.
So I'm holding to this for like any sport, is that if you go in there trying to have a team full of young guys, you're not going to it's going to be a disaster. There's no way you can field a team full of like first, second, and third year players, even if you pepper in like 1 or 2 vets, which they kind of had with Alec Burks and Bogey, but that's basically it. And then a bunch of reclamation projects. It's like each reclamation project takes a hell of a lot of work. And they had like
a lot of money, and a lot of money too, and a lot of money.
Yeah, and then they end up sending out a bench anyway, so it's not like they're getting playing time, right? And so if you're trying to give a bunch of young guys playing time, you're going to end up with the Pistons team we just had. So I do think you need vets, and I don't think you should. And their mandate the whole time should be you are there to compete for your minutes, and if the vets outcompete the young guys, so be it. If the young guys beat out the vets, so be it.
Right.
That's the one thing of, like we'll talk about the Tigers soon. Like, look at the approach they take. We're going to let the young guys play. It's like, well, then you have a shit product and I got to watch this for another year. And then, whereas you look at the Red Wings, they have to have a bunch of young guys and they're trying to build through the draft. But when they couldn't score, what did they do? They went out and signed scorers. They went out and signed defensemen. They try, and they have to figure their goalie situation. So you have to bring in some vets who know what the hell they're doing while the young guys make their mistakes. You don't want a team full of young guys all making their mistakes at the same time. That's a disaster. So, and then people are talking about, oh, what are we going to do in a draft? I'm like, well, you're going to draft another 20-year-old guy. I don't care. It's like, what is that going to do? Nothing. Unless he's LeBron James or something fairly similar, or Wembanyama from last year, forget it. You're not going to have a game changer. So,
and that's a good point, because of at the fifth pick, most of the guys I see being mentioned with the Pistons Well, they can't shoot, or at the very least, to say, well, they project to become a good shooter, and we've been hearing that since Stanley Johnson and all these other guys that have come through, or they're like a Klingon who was a defensive specialist. Well, let me ask you this, Nick. We'll follow up on that. Would you? I see a lot of the Pistons fans online are really torn. I actually think a lot of them just think there's a core here. And I'm on the line. You don't have a core when you win 14 games, and there's a lot of people saying, "Well, you can't trade Ivy, you can't trade Doran, you can't trade Thompson. They're young. They could be something." And the thing I want to ask you though is, if you have a chance to say package a couple of those guys in a draft pick to get a legit NBA, maybe not even as Greg puts it, competent player, but we even have a chance to say a Brandon Ingram or something, a guy who a legit 20-point scorer, who has been in the playoffs. So wouldn't you be tempted just to do that? Because I'm not sold on these guys that we've drafted.
We get hesitant sometimes because you think a guy might have potential and you hold on to him too long. I mean, the classic example is, we gave up John Smoltz to get Doyle Alexander. I know it's a baseball analogy, but that's the one that everybody's afraid of. We make another one of those. Honestly,
bring up the outlier. It's always the outlier they bring up.
Right. It is always the outlier because most of the time you make a trade, it's kind of meh. Maybe it works out for one team and not the other. Maybe you're also not confident in your GM can make an intelligent trade or, can outwit the other team. Right. And so, I'm trying to remember where I was going with this, but,
are you willing to
my
get
general
rid of some
rule,
of these guys, in other words? Yeah.
Honestly, here's my rule of thumb. Instead of getting too kind of emotionally attached to any one of these players, including Cade, you ask yourself, if I make this trade, am I making my team better?
Yeah.
If you're trading for prospects, who the hell knows? Honestly, who knows? You may get lucky, you may not. But if you're trading some prospect for, a good established player, maybe that's a good trade because the general manager's job is to put out a competitive team. And if they're not good this year, you have to make them better. Your job is to make them better next year. That's it. So I'm not married. I like some of these young guys. I feel bad that they were not coached very well last year. And the whole organization was in a chaos. But, if they trade Duran for as much hype as they give him, if they trade anybody else, I say, so what? If the Pistons are better, legitimately better, not like 2 games better next year, but like legitimately better for getting somebody else in exchange, do it. Then just do it. Yeah.
Well, Greg, I think I know where you would fall on this because we've preached this for years on this show. When in a trade for prospects, a trade between prospects and the other team getting a legit big league, MLB, NFL, NBA player, the team that gets the established player almost always wins the trade. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's not just us, going with our gut feeling. I believe that can easily be proven with research, legitimate research, to show that indeed that's the case. But here's the thing: when the Pistons, you mentioned, we both mentioned the 80s and Jack McCloskey. What happened there was, obviously they had a big draft in 81 when they got Isaiah and Kelly. That's fine, okay. But it wasn't even with Isaiah and Kelly, they were not a playoff team until they started adding veteran pieces. Not just they did. It's a fallacy to say that championship team was built on the draft. That's a fallacy. Now, they did have some good draft picks. That's true. They drafted Rodman. That was a big find. It was drafted out of some school nobody heard of. That's true. Sally was drafted out of Georgia Tech, and Sally, I don't know if anybody remembers, for the first 2 or 3 months of his rookie season was awful. Absolutely awful. He got his act together in the second half of that season and obviously became a very good player. But that team was built largely on Jack adding veterans Vinnie Johnson, who had been with the Sonics, Bill Lambier, who had been with the Cavaliers, trading Kelly to get Dantley, trading Dantley to get Aguirre. That team was built. James Edwards was picked up in '88.
Yeah.
That team was built on getting veteran players. And yeah, there were some draft picks in there too. That's true. But those draft picks, Al, except for maybe Jumar, Sally, and Rodman, other than that, that team was largely based on acquiring veteran players from other teams to complement. Who would have thought that Kelly would have been flipped in less than 5 years? When he and Isaiah came in the league together, they were going to be the core. And you made a good point about there's no core. There's no core when you win 14 games. But Kelly and Isaiah were going to be the core. But it became evident that Kelly didn't play the kind of defense that Jack or Chuck Daly wanted to win in the NBA. So he was traded for Dantley. And Kelly did not play very long after he was traded from Detroit. He was out of the league a few years later, by the way. Nobody seems to remember that. But that's how that team was built. To Nick's point, that you can't just have and Nick is, by the way, Nick is dead on when it comes to. Nick's been talking about this for a while on Twitter about this absurdity of blocking youth, blocking the kids, and this is all the Tigers now, blocking the kids so that you can play so you don't want to sign veterans because you want to block the kids. That's just absolutely a loser's mentality. Absolute loser's mentality. And so you're right, Al. The trade between the prospects and established players always go to the established players.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nick. Please step in.
I was going to add in and emphasize something Greg was saying, and I really believe this. Going back to Jack McCloskey, he not only drafted, but he was constantly changing the pieces, massaging the roster to improve it all the time. That roster was never set with, this is my core, and by God, a core nowadays it sounds ridiculous. It's basically the finalists in an ugly contest. So I don't know how else to describe it, but who the fuck cares? The core can change. A member can come in and out of the core. Who cares?
He traded Dantley for Aguirre, for God's sakes.
That's right. I mean, Dantley was a huge piece of the Pistons.
Yeah. And you can argue that was actually a downgrade because at the time, Aguirre was a better player, numbers-wise. But he fit the team better.
Right. And, it took him over the top. If you look at the Pistons of 2004, only one of those starting five was drafted by the Pistons. Yeah. And that was Tayshaun Prince. Yeah. Other guys were trades. Three of them were trades. I think Billups was a free agent signing. And, that year they won it. Who was their number one pick? Darko. Right. Seriously, a well-touted
cigar. Yes.
I mean, at the time he was considered, the next best player after LeBron. So it wasn't, hindsight tells you how bad it was, but not at the time. So, and you got to keep mixing and matching those pieces. The Pistons in 2004 didn't go, over the top until they picked up Rasheed Wallace. I mean, he was the missing piece for that team. Right. So, a good GM is mixing it up all the time, massaging that roster. That's not a small thing. So, and to stick with your core, I mean, to stick with your core is just a stupid strategy. It's lazy. It's for the unimaginative. It's the people who don't want to take a risk because every trade and every free agent signing is a risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we could go a little bit into Trajan Langton, but we really don't know for the most part. I remember him playing for Duke when he was the Alaskan Assassin. Then after that, I just lost track of the guy. And apparently he played in the NBA for 3 years. Then he had a long career overseas where apparently he was very successful. Once he retired, he bounced around as a scout and just started working his way up till he became a general manager of the Pelicans in 2019. So, I'd like to say, well, we can talk about him, but guys, I'd be honest with you, I have no idea what this guy is capable of. And and the thing is, from all accounts, he was the number one guy in New Orleans. So I don't know where you are in this, Greg, but I'm hoping for the best. I'm pretty scoreless when it comes to Trajan Langton. I really don't know what he's capable of or what he's done.
There is the timeline for these folks to come in, whether it's a coach or an executive, has shrunk over the years. It used to be, well, you give a guy 3 years, give a guy 4 years. NFL used to treat coaches like they were college football programs. Well, you got to give a guy 3 or 4 years. But what I'm seeing, though, is that the teams that are successful are the ones, to Nick's point, are the risk-taking ones that are willing to cut bait on a guy after a couple of years. I would rather. There was an old Branch Rickey, the great Branch Rickey, used to say, and I've said this before, and you know this on this program. Branch Rickey used to say, "I'd rather trade a guy 1 year too early than 1 year too late," and that is the sign of a risk taker right there. That is what I'm talking about. What Nick's talking about. It's a guy who somebody just posted on Twitter. Well, I want to give Harris to 2025, and I just wrote back a couple seconds ago. I said, "What is it about Harris that makes you think that 2025 is going to be any different?" And Nick's completely correct when he says that this whole premise of building a core is lazy, and not only is it lazy. Somebody else on Twitter said it's not only lazy, it's a way to just milk the clock. And I look at teams. Al, look at the Royals, who won a World Series in, I think, 2014 or 2015. Won the World Series in 2015. Have gone down to the tubes and have come back up again.
Yeah.
How did they do it? Look at the Indians or the Guardians, who I didn't think were going to be. They won 90 some odd games in 2022. Fell back to, I believe, under 500 last year. Now here they are again playing, probably win 100 games maybe this year the way they're playing. I want to know how these teams are doing it. Harris was hired away from his background is with the Giants and the Cubs. He worked under Theo Epstein with the Cubs, fine. He worked under that guy at San Francisco, fine. But as we're finding out, a lot of these guys who worked, quote unquote, under people, so what? They need to do it themselves. How many times have we heard, well, Steve Mariucci used to be Brett Favre's quarterback coach at the Packers. Who cares? I want to know what was doing running my NFL team. That's what I want to know about. I don't care that he used to be Brett Favre's quarterback coach in Green Bay. That doesn't make me feel any better. I want to know what he does in the NFL as a head coach. That's what I want to know.
Are you saying Matt Patricia was a bad choice?
No, he's saying that he should have got at least one more year, maybe two. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we needed.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Nick, I'll let you kind of finish this topic off. Is there anything you want to add? Because that way we can move on to the Tigers. I know we talked about this being a shorter podcast. I think we've already done an hour on the Pistons. So is there anything you'd like to add before we move on?
I'm kind of with you guys. I don't know what to make of Langdon, honestly. Yeah. Maybe he's making some good decisions, maybe not. It's hard to tell. I have no idea what to expect. We'll see what now the official offseason to the NBA holds and what they do. If they do very little, if they only draft and, I don't know, do what, and I don't know. We'll see. I haven't the slightest idea, but I'm not holding my breath either. So.
Yeah. If you held your breath, well, you would pass out and turn blue, and we'd have to call 911. We don't want to do that. So, all right. Hopefully, guys, by the next time we talk in 2 weeks, that we'll actually have some words from Trajan Langton that we can go into about what they're going to do, and they'll actually announce what they've done with Monty Williams, because right now everything we're talking about is conjecture. It really, really is. It's asinine, but that's where the Pistons have us. All right, and Greg, I think it's time for question 2 of the birthday game.
Absolutely, this is for the already solved Rubik's Cube, so you guys don't have to be put through the rigors of trying to solve that thing. He was born in this state in 1939. He was a baseball player. He played his entire 19-year career in the National League. He had more than 3,000 hits, and this might almost be clue 3-ish in terms of a giveaway. But he had more stolen bases than he had RBIs.
3,000 hits, lots of stolen bases. Wouldn't be Lou Brock, would it?
It would be Lou Brock. Very good. Absolutely.
Boy, times have changed. A guy like Lou Brock, that kind of player doesn't exist anymore.
Lou Brock had 938 stolen bases and 900 RBIs. How about that? I don't know if we'll ever see that again. A guy with more RBIs and stolen bases. Who played that long?
All right. Well, Greg, can you send that to Traverse City?
I can. I sure can. Just give me a P.O. box.
Yeah.
Just
in other news, go ahead, Nick.
Just so you know, with the Rubik's Cube, I figured out how to solve it. And it's not like everybody else. I don't do things conventional, if you haven't noticed. I basically figure out how to disassemble the Rubik's Cube and reassemble the whole cube.
Oh, you're one of those guys.
What do you
well,
do?
That's what happens when you spike it on the floor when you're pissed off.
I see.
Oh, my God. Oh, shit. Okay. In other news, I'm looking out the window here. I've been abandoned. The pontoon is gone, and so is everybody else. So I'm stuck here now. Well, they're out having fun on the lake. They might be fishing. I'm not sure because it's pretty damn hot. I don't know what they're going to do. It's either that or they're going to have gone swimming again. So you're stuck with me because I have no place else to go with them. So, all right.
Neither do we.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Tigers because we're headed into the dog days of the baseball season. I can't believe it's mid-June already, and we're going to go into I know one of Nick's favorite topics. That's Scott Harris, and I know Greg just wrote about it on his latest Substack. Again, please subscribe to that because Greg is on top of these things, but. Well, we'll start here. They're stumbling along as a 500 team. I think as of right now, I think they're 34 and 38, 35 and 37, something like that. We're in that range. Like I said, I'm in the up north bubble. I haven't been able to watch a lot of Tigers games up here. I'm getting the headlines. But regardless of all that, they've been hovering around 500, and we're hearing again from Scott Harris, the president of baseball operations, he's the Pobo, and he claims this team is not ready to spend, but is confident owner Chris Ilitch will open his wallet when the time is right. In recent interviews, he is still using "we're a young team" trope, and this is one of his most recent quotes. I found this on 97.1. We're a young team that is still finding our way. We've shown some flashes of really exciting play on both sides of the ball. I think we're searching for that consistency that comes with the maturation of young hitters and young starting pitchers in the big leagues. With youth often comes variance, and I think we're living that week to week here. But we've seen a lot of positive signs under the hood, and some of those are translating into performance in recent weeks. What the hell is he talking about, Greg? Most of these young players, Spencer, we'll get into some of the rosters. Spencer Torkelson was set down. Colt Keefe looks like an overwhelmed rookie. Most of these other guys, these young position players, aren't doing anything. And most of the pitchers he's talking about, he didn't even draft. So, reading that quote, he really does sound like a guy who has a master's in business and is heavy in the analytics. And it really felt unemotional. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Or it really felt like this is a numbers guy at an auto company who doesn't like fast cars, if you know what I'm saying. It just felt very unemotional. And this is the last thing, again, another fan base that has been struggling for close to a decade at this point. They don't want to hear, well, we're seeing variance. Variance? What the hell is this, Greg?
Well, and I thanks for the plug on the article, gregino.substack.com. I did pretty much eviscerate Scott Harris yesterday, and one of the things that bothers me about this guy, and I said this a couple of shows ago, and I said I was getting smartest guy in the room vibes from him, and that quote that you just read is kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. There's a couple of things going on with that. First of all, what you'd like to see from anyone who's coming into town is some ability to read the room, some ability to know, okay, look, I'm coming to a franchise now whose fan base hasn't seen a playoff contending team in 8 years and hasn't been in the playoffs in 10, and hasn't been, and not only that, but hasn't been anywhere close to the playoffs since then. So I'm not. Why would I start to talk about? Your eyes start to glaze over when Scott Harris talks about baseball. You get the feeling that if you went to a game with this guy, and that's why I wrote my lead in the story. The article was, does Scott Harris watch the Tigers? And I was kind of being facetious, of course, obviously, but the point being is that if you go to the ball game with this guy, like if you and he like sat in the stands and watched the game, I don't know that you'd feel like you're watching a game with a baseball fan. I don't know if you'd feel like you could have a conversation with him that would be like you and I would have a conversation about baseball, or Nick and I, or somebody like that. I get the feeling that he's, and your analogy, by the way, of being a numbers guy in a car company is really pretty apt. I mean, it's very, I'm not sure about the unemotional part, because sometimes words can look unemotional if you read them in the paper, right, of course, but you don't get the feeling that this guy lives. You don't get the feeling that he likes baseball as much as he likes the idea of baseball, if that makes any sense. Yeah. He's like, I think he likes the idea of baseball more than he likes baseball, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I know this is one of your favorite topics, Nick. I think Greg's got a point. That when he says he likes the idea of baseball. It really feels like he likes the numbers of baseball, yet he doesn't. He may not give two shits about the actual. I don't know where to put it. Maybe the. I get the feeling as a GM he doesn't have gut feelings. He's strictly numbers and analytics based, and I'm not completely sure. I mean, I believe in a lot of these analytic numbers. But there has to be a balance. I'm getting the impression from Harris, Nick, that he doesn't believe in that balance. No, it's numbers, strictly numbers, and that can also go when it comes to salary as well.
And I think you guys even give him too much credit for the numbers, to be honest with you. Anything I heard about him talking about numbers it's pretty simple-minded. And after Greg announced his article yesterday, which I highly recommend. It's pretty on point. My comment to it was, Scott Harris sounds like he just read Moneyball on the way to his interview with Mike Ilitch.
Yeah, right. I love that. I love that analogy.
I mean, that's what it sounds like. It just seems 20 years too late, simple-minded, and he's one of these like business people who's so stupid he doesn't realize that people know he's stupid. I don't know how else to describe it. He has done like nothing for the Tigers. I've heard people say, well, he's been good for development. Like, no, he hasn't. How the hell do you know? I don't know. Just because he's playing young guys because he has no idea how to acquire actual veterans.
Right.
That's, it's lazy, but what other choice does he have at that point? Development is going to, revamping the Tigers' minor league development system, that's going to take a decade. Who the hell knows when that'll be up and running, or whether that's improved. So, honestly, he's been very unimaginative, unimpressive, and actually, I'm starting to think some of these front office guys, these pobos, should not do press conferences because they only tend to say something stupid every time. At least that's the case with the Pistons and with the Tigers, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know what the hell he's doing. Honestly, he's doing the laziest, easiest thing possible.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me throw this out here. This is a quote from Greg's piece on Substack, and this is another Harris quote. We just have to develop the core that we're going to spend around, and then we have to target the players in upcoming winters that can really help us. And as Greg, this is Greg's reaction. Did you catch the money quote? We just have to develop the core. And it's funny, Greg, because we were just talking about the Pistons, whose core, I think at this point, is essentially Cade Cunningham, and then I don't know if you can consider anybody else part of the core. When it comes to the Tigers, there's Scooble, there's Green, Carpenter probably. After that, who the hell is the core? You know, and they have 20. No, you got another 24 guys. You got to get on the damn roster to have a core, so to speak. And right now, I don't think the Tigers really have a core.
Well, the Tigers of the 1984 Tigers, who we all know and love, their core was all homegrown. Trammell, Whitaker, Gibson, Morris, and Parrish. Okay, all homegrown. That's fine. Back when they could do that, there was a pocket of time when Bill LaJoy was running the scouting department before he became the GM, where they were developing these, in some cases, Hall of Fame players, in other cases, very good players. And they were the core of the team that won the championship. But to Nick's point, that team was still, despite those players, was still not they were still not a World Series contending or winning team until Bill LaJoy made moves like getting Willie Hernandez and getting Dave Bergman and getting Chet Lemon and although that was Jim Campbell move, but still they added those veterans from other teams to as good as that core was, to complement that core. And so I think what we're all saying, guys, is you can't do it by youth alone. You can't do it by draft alone. And Nick was right earlier when he was talking about how Jack McCloskey, and he's absolutely correct, would massage the roster with the Pistons every single year. That roster, even from 87, when they made the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics, to the 89 team that won the whole thing, you had a turnover there. You had Edwards was added. Aguirre was added. I'm sure I can probably look up a couple of other players that were added to that roster between a very good 87 team and the team that won it all in 89. Why? Because Jack was not satisfied with the results. He was hired to bring a championship to the Pistons, not to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, not to make it to the NBA Finals and lose. He was, which he did with Dantley, by the way. He was hired to win a championship, so he did what he needed to do. And Jack had his warts. He was infatuated with big men. He was infatuated with guys like Willie Bedford. That's fine. Everybody can make a mistake. He traded a number 1 draft pick for Kurt Nymphius. That's okay. That's all right. But they were more than canceled out by all the good moves that he made. So I think what we're all saying here on this podcast is you can't live with rely on youth and just expect that. And here's the other thing. And I said in that article, the Tigers couldn't even develop a Polaroid, okay, let alone players that are actually, solid MLB players. So I don't want to hear about developing. I don't want to hear about relying on developing players as if they've been great at it. As if if this was the Red Wings of the 2000s when they were getting guys in the 8th round and they were Hall of Famers, I'd buy it. But not with the Tigers. This is a franchise that has not been able to develop anything in 30 years. And you're going to tell me that all of a sudden you're going to develop a core and only then will you add with veterans. It's disgusting.
Greg, I'm going to add to the 84 Tigers analogy. They did have a core of guys they developed and drafted and developed. But those guys started as rookies in 1978?
Right.
And with the exception of Gibson, who came a couple years later.
Right.
And so those guys were in their 6th freaking year before they won a World Series.
Correct.
And in that whole time, you still needed Steve Kemp. You had Jason Thompson in and out of there. You had other guys coming in and out of that team to try and get them to compete. So it's not like you just waited till this core all of a sudden mushroomed and presto.
Right.
You can't develop this in series. You can't sit there and say, we're going to try and be competitive. No, you're building a rebuild culture. So you're going to be in this mentality where you're just going to be in this, eternal rebuild like the Lions have been. You have to say, even if this is a lousy team, you're out there to compete. Tough shit. If you don't, we're going to find somebody else. And the general manager, Pobo, whoever the fuck, has to keep mixing and matching the pieces, bringing in free agents, trying to make a trade. And we all point to Dave Dombrowski. That guy was a wizard. You're not going to find another one like him again. He made some crazy ass trades for the Tigers.
Right.
Harris doesn't have the balls to make a trade like that. You wouldn't know the first thing about making a trade. I just looked up yesterday. I looked up the Max Scherzer trade that brought Max to Detroit. That was a 3-team trade. Detroit got Scherzer and Daniel Schlereth who was a decent reliever for a couple years.
Yeah.
They got rid of Granderson in that trade, who was actually established really good center fielder. They got rid of a starting pitcher, Edwin Jackson, but they picked up Scherzer in there, who was a prospect, but, they hit a home run on that one, to be honest. So, but, and then the Yankees were in that trade and with the Diamondbacks. It was complicated, but they traded away good pieces.
That also, Austin Jackson part of that whole mess as well, if I remember right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's right. They got Austin Jackson to replace Granderson in center field. So
yeah, and that's a gutty trade because Granderson became he put together all-star numbers when he was at the Yankees. He was an established big league all-star caliber center fielder, and those are hard to find.
And we got a Cy Young Award winner out of it. So exactly. You take that risk, but you're mixing and matching the pieces the whole time. So it just has to happen. You don't have otherwise you're going to sit and wait. Let's go first. Let's draft. And then after we draft, we develop. And then we're going to develop the core. And then after the core, we're going to add in free agents. That's stupid. That's going to take a lifetime to do. You're never going to get anywhere with that. So
it also gives me vibes of they want to be the Tampa Bay Rays. And if there's one team you don't want to emulate is the Tampa Bay Rays. My father is he's a diehard Rays fan down in Florida.
Right.
And it kills him to see anybody who is coming up on a big contract gets traded away. And for the most part, they've been able to replace him. But it's kind of this year they kind of fallen off. But to get back on track of that is the way they're talking. We need to build the young guys. We need to build around the kids, and that's going to be the core. Very, very, very few teams are capable of pulling that off. As you brought up the Jim Leyland era Tigers, Nick, that's a perfect point. How many homegrown players were realistically important on that team? You had Justin Verlander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and who else?
Yeah,
and that's really what it comes down to. There is no in today's any sport. There is no such thing unless you're the rare franchise like the Rays of building around a continuing churn of young players. It's absolutely ridiculous. And that's what I really do think. Harris, I wouldn't say really do think, but I'm getting vibes of he's selling Chris Ilitch on we can be the Rays, but maybe with a little higher payroll. And that is not a way to build a team.
You know what, though? I think the Rays are like the worst thing that could have happened to a lot of MLB franchise fan bases.
That's a good
point. Because
point.
the Rays are held up as this. Here's the thing about the Rays. And if your dad's going to listen to this podcast, he might want to put his fingers in his ears from what I'm about to say. But the Rays have proven only to me that all they can do is win 90 games. They win 90 games. Okay. They win 90 games, make the playoffs, and do what? Nothing.
Yeah.
They've done nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They have not won a championship. There was one year, I think it was in 2007 or 8, where they played the Rockies I think it was the Rockies, or maybe not with the Rockies. It was what team did they play? The Phillies, maybe in the World Series. They made it to the World Series. That's fine. Since then, what the Rays are very good at, is winning 90 games and making it to the playoffs. That's what they're very good at. Other than that, they haven't done anything. Nothing. And for some reason, the Rays are held up as this model franchise because they can win 90 games and make the playoffs on a shoestring budget. If that's what moves if that's what floats your boat, fine. But I thought the whole objective was to win the World Series. I might be crazy.
Greg, that's no different than the Oakland A's of the Moneyball era from the early 2000s. I mean, Billy Beane was, getting the team into the playoffs every single year. They never made one single World Series appearance, not a single one.
Right.
So, because you can't just do it on shoestring budgets, and you can't expect to do that every year. You need some level of talent, maybe some kind of one or two guys that just takes you over the top. But, you can't just do that with homegrown talent development alone. You really can't.
Yeah. No,
exactly. And, it's damn ridiculous that we're even discussing this, this young core stuff, and when it's like Greg said, it's like it's 1980 again, and the game's different. That's why we're on all this stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the roster changes that have recently happened. One is one of Nick's favorite. I'm hoping Nick pops a hernia like he threatened to over text yesterday. But Spencer Torkelson, now he's been demoted to AAA Toledo. Javi Baez is on the IL of some sort of back issue. Kerry Carpenter, that's the most important one, if you ask me. We'll get into all this. He has hurt his back. Probably going to be out quite a while, at least after the All-Star break. But I guess we'll start with Torkelson. I know this has been a fun time over the past few months, but Torkelson was finally demoted to AAA Toledo. He posted a horrible 597 OPS, an OPS plus of 68. He hit just his slash numbers, average of 201, 266 on base percentage at 330 slugging. A 330 slugging from your middle of the order first baseman, with only 4 home run, 18 RBI, over 230 plate appearances. They're really starting to look like his second half of last year. It was actually only about 2 months of last year is the outlier. And what I found was interesting, is that if I checked Twitter, and you have the Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold was talking about how bad of a second baseman Colt Keith is, and he's making the case that maybe the Tigers' future first baseman should be Colt Keith. I don't know where this team is going at first base, but what they got right now ain't cutting it, Nick.
So I will just say this. I think about a week or so ago, and I'm going to break my rule. I put out on Twitter that I will no longer talk about Spencer Torkelson because I wasted way too much time on that, and I think every other Tigers fan is too. He is at this point a glorified AAA player, and has the skills of a AAA player that just had had one of these momentary Chris Sheldon. Had a Chris Sheldon moment last year. When he can hit in the major leagues, if he ever does, fine. I may be changing my tune, but he's not worth wasting any more time on until he can come to the major leagues. And if they decide to trade him, I don't know what the hell they'll get for him, or let him go, so be it. I really don't give a damn anymore. It's like we spent 3 years talking about this guy. He was a good college baseball player, give him an aluminum bat, let him play in college some more. I don't know what. I really don't care. Wake me up when he's a major leaguer at this point. So.
Correct. Yeah, with Torkelson, I guess the other thing we also have to remember, he was part of the 2020 draft. And as we all would rather not remember, that was the peak of COVID. And I'm sure scouting was a bit of an issue at that point in time. But regardless of all that, the Tigers, first base is an important position when it comes to the middle of the order. That's where you need power. This team has no power for the most part. And now they're talking about Colt Keith as your first baseman maybe in the future. That's starting to sound like we don't have a plan.
That's absolutely sounding like we don't have a plan. This is the guy that they gave a bunch of money to back in February before he even set foot on a big league diamond. Okay, I'm okay. Whatever. I'm not one of these guys that cries about money. It's not my money to spend. If they want to spend it, fine. It's not coming out of my pocket. I don't go to the games. I don't buy swag. I don't put money in their pockets. I don't care how they spend their money necessarily. But you're right. Taking that out of the equation, and I made a crack on Twitter. I said, somebody said, well, Cole Keith should go down to Toledo and play first base. I said, well, I thought that Torkelson was doing that. How many minor leaguers are going to send down to play first base?
All of them.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Keith. Yeah, he had a good May. He had a decent May. I will grant you that. He hit pretty well in May. But here's what's concerning, though, Al, about Keith, and nobody's really talking about this yet. He's poor defensively, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was rated. I don't know unless you guys know more than I do. I didn't know that Cole Keith was supposed to be this bad defensively. I thought he was supposed to be better than this defensively. And Al, you know this because you follow the metrics. He's not a very good defensive second baseman at all.
Metrically, he's horrible.
Right.
He's like -8 runs defensively at this point. Defensive runs saved.
To me, that's the bigger concern. I mean, the hitting, I get the feeling like he'll figure it out because he did have a good May. I will grant you that. I'm not as concerned about that as much as I am the defense, which scares me. I don't know why he's this bad. Now, can players get better defensively? Sure, of course they can. But again, we're talking about a franchise that has not exactly had a sparkling record when it comes to developing players on both sides of the ball, offensively or defensively.
I mean, one of the ways I looked at it is, the whole Tigers front office strategy is to try and compete using the Tigers' biggest weakness as an organization, and that's their minor leagues. Yeah. It's like, for crying out loud.
If this was the Atlanta Braves, I'd feel differently, but you're right, yeah.
It's like, and historically bad. I mean, we've already said it. Like, when was the last time they developed somebody? They developed, 2 guys in the last 30 years? Maybe 3. I might have forgotten one. But no, it's a disastrous strategy. I hate to even call it that, but whatever.
Yeah, well, we might as well throw in Javi Baez and all this because he's now been sent to Lakeland to do some rehab work, but he was placed on the injured list with lumbar spine inflammation. And honestly, I don't think that's been causing his issues. But regardless of that, he's become the worst everyday player in Major League Baseball. He's hitting just 183, a 456 OPS. An OPS plus of 29. I mean, an average MLB player is 100.
Right.
And then they call up Ryan Kreidler, and he has put up like a 586 OPS. And I didn't see this happen, guys, but is it true what I read about Kreidler that he missed both second and third base or something? What the hell happened there with him in a game? He missed touching bases or something.
I'm not aware of that one.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm up here in the wilderness, so I'm kind of winging it here. But regardless of all that, Javi Baez. I know we've talked about it. You got to cut bait in this guy. I mean, I'm willing to run with McKinstry and Kreider for the rest of this year. I mean, put those 2 guys together, they'll put together better numbers than Javi Baez. I don't care if you have to eat another $70 million. It's ridiculous, Nick, at this point that Javi Baez is still factoring into this team's plans. Odds are he will come back again this year, but if he's still on the roster as of next year, there's just no way that could happen, is
it? With this Tigers team, I could see it happening for some reason.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I kind of go back to I'm going back to the Pistons here a little bit. You remember when Joe Dumars signed Josh Smith? Remember that experiment?
Of course.
Oh, yes. Let's go with the three big guys up down front. Yeah.
Yeah, what a disaster that was. When Stan Van Gundy came in, he made a lot of bad decisions, but one of the right calls probably was just, I know his contract is big, I know it's a lot, but it's doing nothing for us, And so they cut bait and ate the contract, basically.
Yeah.
If Javi is that much of a liability, are you better off going with a utility fielder? Maybe. They're not going anywhere this year anyhow. So unless whatever they have in the minors to put at shortstop is so bad that Javi is still the best option. So who the hell knows?
And for what it's worth, Kreidler missed first base on a double against the Astros a few days ago. That's what happened. How the hell do you do that? But then he was called on an appeal. But yeah, it's this whole the infield.
Oh, we lost Al for a second.
We have.
But no, we can complain about it. We'll get Al and give Al his. Oh, there he is.
I got all excited there and hit the wrong damn button. All right, let me stop the camera here real quick if I can. There it is. So make sure we don't burn up bandwidth. There we go. All right. Yeah, I got all excited and I hit the wrong damn button. The next thing I know, I'm out of the studio here. But yeah, all of a sudden, guys, the infield looks awful. They don't know who's going to play first base, as their supposed future at first base is now in the minor leagues. Colt Keefe is horrible defensively. He's hit for maybe 3 weeks out of his career so far. Shortstop, we just talked about, and then third base is being held down by a series of journeymen. And then, what the best part of your infield are Carson Kelly, and Jake Rogers as catcher. Oh my God! And where's the core? Your core sure as hell isn't the infield at this point.
Well, you know what, Alan, I wrote in the piece that I wrote yesterday is that let's just lay it bare. Let's just look at what do the Tigers do well? Well, nothing. Do they walk? No. Are they good on base percentage team? No. Are they good OPS team? No. Do they steal bases? No. Do they run the bases well? No. Are they good defensively? No. Do they hit the ball out of the ballpark? No. Okay. Well, they don't do any of those things. Now, do they have good starting pitching? Sometimes. Do they have a good bullpen? Sometimes. That's it. This is what we have now. 8 years after the Tigers even sniffed a wild card spot back when they were kind of in the hunt in the last week of the 2016 season. This is what we're left with now, 8 years later, is a team that doesn't do any of those things well and doesn't seem to be able to I don't see them getting any better at any of those things in the near future. And we're talking about making the second baseman of the future the first baseman in Toledo. This is not a serious organization. I'm sorry. It's just not. And it's a shame because this is a town that's bursting to, then the Jim Leland years, 35,000 fans in the ballpark every night. It was electric. And to Nick's point, that was a team built largely on trades by Dave Dombrowski. And some of them were, low risk, high reward, but some were high risk, high reward. And I don't know. I feel like there's no sense of urgency from Scott Harris whatsoever. And that scares me. That kind of stuff, that really bothers me. When I see that lack of urgency, it gives me the creeps. Because it's like look around you. Look at this fan base who've been watching bad baseball for the last 8 years. I want somebody who's going to say, well, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable, and damn it, I'm going to do whatever I can to fix it. I don't get that feeling with Harris whatsoever.
Oh boy, this has been a fun conversation. Good Lord. Between both of these teams. Man, let's talk about the Lions place kicking situation. Jake Bates. Yeah, whatever. Oh my God. I think Greg pretty much summed it up very well there. So it'd be a good time to start wrapping things up because we ended up going longer than we thought we were going to begin with. Consider this is more of an experiment or a proof of concept or anything else that we could actually do this podcast when I'm not home. And actually running it off a goddamn hotspot. But and we're kind of muddling our way through it. We'll get this figured out. We'll see how it goes. And so far it's been okay. But with that, I think it's kind of time to start hitting the home stretch here. So I think that means it's time for our jerk of the week. Greg, I'll let you fire off.
I guess my jerk of the week is the WNBA, and it's not just the league itself, like as an entity, but it's the way this whole Caitlin Clark thing has been handled. I feel like this wonderful player, who's a great player coming out of college, maybe the most exciting player the WNBA has seen in a long time, certainly coming out of college in a long time. And unfortunately, and it's not all the league's fault, by the way, it's not just the league's fault. It's the WNBA, like, I don't know if I want to call it the community or the whole thing has been just rife with negativity. The way Clark's been treated, supposedly on the court, the way that there's supposedly jealousy among the other WNBA players, the whole thing has been really, I hate to use this word, catty, and I know I'll probably get some flack for that, but it's just been a catty situation for a player who is finally getting people talking about the WNBA, which should be lauded. Instead, it's not even that they're mad at her. It's not that I'm not mad at Clark. I'm mad at the way that the whole Caitlin Clark rookie season has gone so far. It's been very drama-filled. It's been highly negative, toxic at sometimes, and all I see is a girl that's just trying to make her way in professional basketball, who's trying to say all the right things. And I just feel like the whole Caitlin Clark thing is like it's got this dark cloud over it, and I don't even know who to be mad at. I don't even know who my jerk of the week is, but it's just my jerk of the week is the situation of Caitlin Clark and the WNBA surrounded by all this negativity.
Let me ask you this, Greg. I would add to your jerk of the week are her teammates who seem to never stand up for her when this shit happens to her.
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's just sad to me that I feel like in a way the WNBA has been exposed in a way as for the type of people that are in the league, and I hope I'm off point on that. I hope I'm off point on that. But I feel like the Caitlin Clark thing has shown to me what the WNBA truly is, and I don't like it.
Well said. Vic, your turn. Who's jerk of the week?
I'm going to go with something that's maybe a little more obscure nowadays, but I just read something where former LSU and Kansas State coach Les Miles is suing LSU for having vacated a bunch of his victories for violating, which happened because he violated a bunch of NCAA rules. And those vacated victories makes him ineligible for the College Football Hall of Fame now by 3 wins. So I'm not sure if it's more I'm targeting Les Miles himself, which I really don't care about, right. Or it's the NCAA and their bullshit, violation of recruiting rules and paying players and all of that stuff. So it's kind of the whole college football sort of dumpster fire, really. Yeah. So that's kind of my collective jerk of the week. Les Miles and the NCAA and their requirements all together. I don't like either side. I don't side with either one of them. So.
Yeah, I saw the headline. I didn't know it was over 3 lousy wins to get him in the. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Oh, jeez. All right, my jerk of the week. I'm going to go with the one-man crime wave, Isaiah Buggs.
Oh God.
Oh yes, yeah.
The ex-Lion, who apparently, I guess he became as the Lions' mantra is no turds in the punch bowl, and he was a turd, as we're finding out because he's had a rough month or so. As the headline here in The Athletic says, Chief Isaiah Buggs allegedly dragged woman downstairs before his arrest Sunday. And it's actually that woman was the mother of his child. And he was obviously this happened in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I believe. And also before that, there was in late May, Buggs was accused of animal cruelty in Tuscaloosa as well. 2 dogs were left on the back porch of a home that investigators found was rented by Buggs. And apparently they moved out and left the animals there. And they apparently owed back rent as well. Dogs were severely malnourished, emaciated, so on and so forth. And then he tops that off with beating the mother of his wife, the mother of his kids, I should say. So I remember there was a bit of angst when the Lions let Buggs go, because he kind of had a bit of a career resurgence with the Lions. But it's being proven, as we've seen with Cam Sutton as well, that the Lions would never let any of this stuff slide, especially having a woman as the owner of the team. So my jerk of the week, Isaiah Buggs, for becoming a one-man NFL crime wave. And essentially good riddance. I'm glad he's gone from the Lions as of a couple years ago. So that's my jerk. Guys, I think it's time to wrap things up. I think
what another good one?
Going on.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You know what another good one would have been out? And talking about the NFL would have been the Steelers could have been a jerk of the week for signing Cam Sutton.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, and the funniest kind of flew under the radar because they also extended Mike Tomlin. So what is it? The Steelers have had like 3 coaches for the vast majority of our lifetimes. It's amazing, which is hard to say. You know,
right?
But there's plenty of jerks to go around. Sometimes we have to pick and choose, which is sad to say the very least. All right. I think we kind of pulled this off, guys, even though we weren't able to run video. We'll see if we can get that fixed in the future podcast when I'm up here. But we did it. We've pretty much reached the end of the show, and we're still online. I'm shocked. So I think with that, I think that's the point of the show, Greg, where you get out the social media, the thank yous, and anything else we may have coming up on the episodes.
Absolutely. 2 weeks from almost 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be talking with City Hall about the NBA. The NBA draft will have come and gone. The Pistons will have made some sort of move at that point, whether it's trading down or indeed staying at number 5 and making a trade or making a draft pick. We'll talk about that with City. We'll talk about his impressions of how the NBA playoffs played out, and we'll do that on July 1st. Please read me at gregeno.substack.com. Subscribe while it's free. I appreciate that. I'll be in your inbox every Monday. Follow me on Twitter at Gregeno, and follow the Knee Jerks, of course, on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. I want to thank my lovely wife, Sharon, for putting up with this nonsense every couple of weeks. And thank you, gentlemen, for making, in this case, Tuesday night so gosh darn fun.
Yes, and Nick, anything you'd like to throw out there? I know you are a big man on Twitter. If you want to throw out your Twitter handle, anything else that's going on?
No, mostly that. I invite people who are listeners to come join the conversation. Greg's articles usually spark conversation, and we get kind of pretty busy on Tuesdays. Like, Jesus Christ, today people have gone nuts, myself included, talking about the Tigers. But it's fun. We agree and disagree, but it's always civil, and it's just great to go back and forth. So come join and check us out on Twitter. You can find me at Nick Milanovic or Greg at Gregino, and we're talking Detroit sports all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And please subscribe to Greg's Substack. It's definitely worth reading. All right. As always, if you want to listen to the show, we're available at all the usual places. Like, share, subscribe, and do it at Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. Music Podcast. Like I said, YouTube Podcast no longer exists. It's YouTube Music, and then they have a podcast subsection. iHeartRadio, Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. We're on Deezer. We're on Radio Public. We're on Ghana, whatever the hell that is. Our webpage is thekneejerks.net, and I have to renew it shortly. That's coming up. And it's essentially anything about the show will be found there. You can find the links to the guys' social media. You can find the links to Greg's Substack. You can find the topics we talk about. There'll be links to where we've got a lot of information will be found there. links to our guests, anything that they're doing. We link on the kneejerks.net. That's also where you can directly download the show, or for that matter, you can actually stream from there as well. And as we're doing right now, we also stream this podcast live onto our YouTube page. Just look up the Knee Jerks Podcast on YouTube. You will find us there. And if you want to watch us live, and like the train wreck that this has been so far, where we had to end up turning off our video before we could actually record. But like I said, this is all a work in progress, and we're still figuring this out, especially with me on the road. And it's going to happen a lot more. I'll get into that in a sec here. But also, I want to give out a shout out. We have listeners in Barefoot Bay, Florida, guys. We have retirees listening to the show now.
Oh, nice.
Right on.
Along with my dad and stepmom, Ron and Maggie, they can watch us on their big screen TV as I set up the YouTube on there. We also have some fans from Boston, Jim and Betty. They listen to the show. They're really good friends of my parents. I actually went out to dinner when I was in Florida last week visiting my dad, and I want to give a shout out to Jim because he's a huge Boston sports fan, but he's a huge Celtics guy. And with the Celtics winning the title last night, I'm sure he's on cloud 9 at the moment. So, and thank you for anybody else that listens and goes to the trouble of subscribing to the show. We very much appreciate it because it's been quite an adventure over this past month or so. Because as you hear, we usually give a shout out to Linda at the end of the show. She retired this week. She was officially retired as of the 15th. So we're going to spend a lot more time up here at the lake. This is our first extended trip. She retired. So her last full day of work, guys, was Thursday. It was Thursday. We were leaving for the lake Friday morning, and we're here for 2 weeks, and then it's going to be for 2 or 3 weeks stints at a time. She's going to work part time, going to work 1 week a month, 3 days. So I'm sure we'll be doing this a bit more. So I want to also give a shout out to Nick and Greg, who are putting up with me trying to figure all this out, trying to do it from remotely. Yeah, like I said, I'm on a computer. I have no idea. I haven't used. This is the second time I've used this laptop. I had no idea if I was going to have enough bandwidth. I've been drinking today because that's what we do up here. We day drink. I've already had like 5 or 6 beers in me, so if I sound a little off, that might be why. But again, I want to give a shout out to Nick and Greg for kind of putting up with what I'm trying to figure out right now. Because honestly, there's some big changes in my life right now. So, like I said, I have no idea where that came from. I don't know if you guys heard that.
We missed the last few seconds.
So, yeah, for some reason, Alexa told me there was something going on. I have no idea what it was about. So, like I said, on the laptop, I have no idea. I'm still figuring it out because apparently Linda only uses it. She's a Mac person, and she only uses this Windows laptop to do taxes. So there's like TurboTax on it and nothing else. So, this has been crazy. So, but guys, thank you again for putting up with this bullshit. Okay, I really, really appreciate it.
Of course.
So, I think with that, it's time to get the hell out of here. So, in 2 weeks, when we talk to our NBA stats guru, City Hall, who I'm sure will have even more I would say he'll probably have even more to say than Nick does when it comes to the Pistons. We'll see you in about 2 weeks. So, until that time, this is Al Beat saying, good evening, good luck, and aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Ciao, guys.
And, of course, Greg Eno.
Totally. We'll see you in 2 weeks.